right, Dr. Kat, thank you so much for being a guest today on the Holistic Hub podcast. I am very excited to interview you.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
Oh, awesome. Well, your program, Primal Trust, is absolutely incredible. I have had many clients go through it and have just had incredible transformations. It's been so wonderful helping those in the community dealing with chronic illness, and would really love to just kind of dive into really the why behind it. So like what can occur in someone's life that ends up leading to that limbic system impairment, and I guess kind of like some of the root causes or triggers associated with that. And feel free to kind of talk a little bit about maybe your journey that kind of led into that too.
Yeah, this is such an important question because unfortunately, the way our medical model is set up, when we start getting sick, we get this diagnosis, and the diagnosis ends up becoming a decoy to what caused us to be sick in the first place, meaning you'll get this diagnosis of a pathogen or a toxin or a hormone imbalance or an immune system thing. You're like, oh, this is what's wrong with me. But your question is, what is causing this? That is the question to ask. And it's a question that I didn't really ask myself for many years, causing me to go down the rabbit hole of treatment after treatment and doctor after doctor, trying to fix the pathogen and the toxin and the digestion without stepping back and being like, what is the common denominator? Mm-hmm. Well, what I have found is that the common denominator is a system that is stuck in a survival response. And that survival response can look really functional. It can look like a type A personality, a go-getter. It can look like a people pleaser, a perfectionist. It can look like somebody who also just avoids everything and distracts all the time. Mm-hmm. So the setup is a system that is not in safety, that is in some way in protection and vigilance or dissociation, that over time will cause the autonomic nervous system to fall out of balance. And then when or if we come in contact with a pathogen, a toxin, or whatever, our system is now unable to fully cope with it in an appropriate way and have an appropriate response that is something that should look like a type of inflammatory response, and then the inflammatory response should slow down and resolve. But when we have this chronic survival response that is the reverberating message through the system, the body cannot get the message of safety, and it cannot resolve the original wound of whatever that exposure might have been. So the setup is a system that is stuck in survival.
So you mentioned different types of things we can come into contact with, like maybe a virus or a pathogen or a toxin that can affect the autonomic nervous system. So what are some conditions then that Primal Trust may be most helpful for, or maybe that it was almost originally created for?
Yeah, well, I was the one who had the diagnosis of Lyme disease and mold toxicity and mast cell and autoimmune digestive issues, dysautonomia, which is like postural orthostatic tachycardia, so many other things I honestly can't remember. So it was created for the person that had like a pile of diagnoses and felt cursed. Like, why does my body have all of this? And the deal is, if you have that list, there is a common denominator. It's created for the immune system and the detox system that has just, and the endocrine system that has gone offline and gone rogue because the overarching signaling of the body has also kind of gone rogue. So yeah, it honestly works with a lot of these things that are influenced by our autonomic function, which is the immune system, digestive system, endocrine system.
Mm-hmm. And these kind of conversations are so powerful because like you don't hear this talked about in like the traditional medicine model where we're like thinking about these different environmental factors that can be affecting us in our autonomic nervous system. And then there's that domino effect of just thing after thing after thing occurring in the body. And it feels like you said, you were saying you had a laundry list of symptoms piling up and you're just like, what is going on? And so Primal Trust seems to have this like kind of unique approach to healing chronic illness and trauma. So Can you explain kind of the philosophy behind it and like what is actually differentiating it then from traditional healing methods?
Yeah. Well, let's just start with the name Primal Trust. Because really the name is the compass. Primal Trust, what is it? It's the ability to trust your body has an innate healing capacity. It's the ability to trust that life itself has a flow, a design that you can lean into. It's the ability to trust that what comes and goes out of your life is just part of your life path.
Mm-hmm.
It's the ability to trust that you are worthy and meant to be here, that you have inherent worth. And so, what the name of my company is the compass that is what needs to be restored for the body to have health, which is just simply trust in life itself. And so, our unique approach is like, what is it that causes a person's psyche and a person's physiology to come back into trust? Well, it sometimes takes tools and practices, and sometimes it takes trauma processing techniques, and it takes awareness. And so ultimately, what Primal Trust as a company is doing is trying to ignite that memory structure of the ability to allow life to flow through you, to trust and lean into what's happening, even when it's hard, and to know that your body has an inherent wisdom to fight off infections and detoxify and come back into homeostasis.
I love that. And this is something that I always tell people is that the body has the blueprint to heal. Like it knows how to do it, just needs to be given the right tools and supports. And again, kind of talking about the traditional healing methods where we're trying to maybe even just always chuck supplements or medicines or different things at a condition. Sometimes we need to come back to restoring that body's wisdom and restoring that body's healing capacity. And so you were kind of touching on it a little bit earlier, but I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about Dr. Navio's cell danger response model and how can this explain why people then get stuck in their healing journey and why they might need something like Primal Trust to help them.
Well, for those of you who are listening, if you have not heard of the cell danger response and you're dealing with chronic illness, go look this up because it was a real turning point for me. And gosh, I think like 2018, 2019, I started to learn a lot about the cell danger response. And I was like, this is it. This is the model that describes why all of these diagnoses have piled up. And it's a brilliant theory that is more of a holistic systemic viewpoint on the body versus the traditional medical model, which is a pathogenic viewpoint on the body.
Right.
Meaning the traditional model is like, what bug or what toxin or what thing caused you to have this symptom, and what medication will reverse or alleviate the symptom that you have. Versus the cell danger response is like, what was happening all the way down to the cellular level that caused the body to get stuck in this healing response without being able to resolve? What is keeping the body from naturally resolving what it needs to go through? So the cell danger response, Robert Navio describes these 3 stages that every cell, every part of our body needs to go through when we have exposure to a pathogen, a toxin, a physical injury, a psychological injury. That it's absolutely normal to go into a protection response. We want our cells to hunker down and protect from the virus, the toxin, the pathogen, and to preserve itself. Now, that's normal. What's not normal is when the cell's protection lasts for so long that it doesn't come back into a state of healing and ease and homeostasis. What blocked that? Well, what blocks that is that there's not a signal that gets sent through the system. The war is over. The toxin has passed through. The pathogen is being dealt with. The physical injury has been healed or whatever. And so the cells keep getting the signal of protect. And what does that mean? It means that the cells change their metabolic function. The mitochondria shift their function. The way that cells communicate to each other shift. They become more self-focused and they stop communication. And so the system gets this breakdown. The cells kind of go into isolation and the mitochondria use all of their energy to protect instead of to thrive. And so when I understood, oh my gosh, this is what's happening with my body, I am stuck in a protection response. Robert Navio describes that we have to find ways to signal safety in order to move the body through the stage. And that can happen through different physiological and biochemical signals. And it can happen through psychological and autonomic nervous system signaling as well. And so Primal Trust is really focused on that psychological and nervous system signaling to move the body through the stages of cell danger response and back into homeostasis.
Okay. So could then this explain, like, could you explain a little bit deeper then with that connection kind of between the cell danger response and trauma? Because I'm understanding this, of course, with the complex chronic illness piece, like coming into contact with a virus or a pathogen, but can we kind of dive a little bit deeper into the trauma aspect?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you think about trauma, what kind of state does it induce psychologically? It induces the sense of I need to protect, the sense of I'm not okay, the sense of what's happening is too much to resolve and I need to sort of split that energy off and put it deep into my psyche and avoid dealing with it. And so what happens is trauma is actually the perfect setup to end up resulting in cell danger response physiologically because the same way of dealing with trauma, which is protection, isolation, hunkering down, avoiding, that's the exact same biochemical response that the cells are having. And so it's just one of those things of, that statement is as above, so below, as within, so without. The trauma, as within the psyche, so within the cells. It's the same. It's the same underlying energetic response. And so those who have a chronic trauma history, or even not necessarily chronic, but just a severe, a big stressor that's happened, their psyche has already started to send the signal of protection, hunker down, can't trust, can't communicate. And then there's often a perfect storm where a pathogen or a toxin comes in and it mimics that same kind of trauma in the body. And the body's like, oh yeah, I need to go into protection. And if the psyche has been in a state of protection for so long, it doesn't know how to send the signal of safety anymore. It's going to be unlikely that the autonomic nervous system can easily shift out of that same protection response. They just interweave. And I think the exact biochemistry of how this happens is a bit unknown, but we see it over and over again. And maybe there's some amazing scientists that can say exactly, oh yeah, when your psyche does this, the biochemistry does exactly this. I don't know. I just know that it's correlated, and I see it thousands of times with my members, that correlation.
So to kind of rephrase a little bit what you just said, some people might have dealt with like childhood trauma. Like, let's just talk about like emotional trauma that they went through. They're still functioning though. They're making it through their life. They're, moving on. They're functioning. They're able to do activities of daily living, be social, work, all these different things, exercise. But then let's say they come into contact with a moldy home. And at the time of their trauma, earlier on, their cells were already going into that hyperprotective isolation mode. But then throughout their life, they're basically still sending those signals of danger signals. So then when they come into contact with, let's say, a pathogen, toxin, whatever it is, then that just might be that perfect storm that you're talking about that might just set everything off. So it's almost like, in a sense, the body was almost kind of like gearing up towards this because that those protective signals weren't getting sent anymore from our autonomic nervous system and these other things that you're talking about. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I think what can happen is you want to think of you have a stress bucket and you have a certain amount that you can fill that stress bucket with.
Right.
Over time, that bucket gets more and more and more full. And unfortunately, a moldy home is like a waterfall of stress, meaning not only is it a lot of stress to the system, but it actually continues to shut down the cellular detox pathway even more. Right. So it's just like throwing a massive amount of gasoline on the fire. And that is totally the perfect setup for chronic illness.
Thank you. So then let's say somebody is going through, treatment. Let's just talk about mold, for example. They're treating their mold. Then let's say that their lab tests are showing, like their urine mycotoxin panel shows normal. Their other lab markers are normal. Everything looks good. but they don't feel good. So
Yeah.
why do some people have to retrain their brain, or, retrain their limbic
Yeah.
system, their autonomic nervous system in this sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So the brain can still be sending a signal of danger through the system even after treatment, even when other physiological processes are quote unquote normal. The way the psyche is interpreting its reality is like this is still not okay. And
Okay.
even the smallest amount of toxin or chemical or pathogen that's still in the system can set off that five-alarm fire in the brain that's habituated or primed to interpret everything as threat. So the body is still reacting as if the five-alarm fire is still going on, even if you've worked on resolving it for quite some time.
Okay. So let's talk about, let's say somebody is still living in a moldy home. Is there an okay time to, like, when is the best time to implement Primal Trust? Like, when is the best time to implement this? Because in some of my cases that I've worked with, I've had to have them implement it kind of right away because they're not able to tolerate any supplements, any supports, not many foods. Other cases I've had them implement it a little bit later on. But is there like a Goldilocks time for implementing this Primal Trust program?
Well, my personal feeling is that because the autonomic nervous system is the granddaddy of how everything works, it should be right away, regardless of where you're at. Now, sometimes implementing it can be overwhelming. So you might just
Yes.
start with simple breathing practices every day, just simple, like very simple, like 5 minutes a day. We're about to actually come out with a new program that's a 5 minute a day, 40-day program for this person. And I think it's going to be exceptional because a lot of people literally are in so much overwhelm. They like, I can't go through this whole nervous system retraining. And I'm like, yeah, but you need to do something because this is the ground floor of what needs to be rebuilt. And it needs to start from you and from your own ability to be present with what is. So I would say right away, you might need to start with just a few minutes a day.
Okay. So that kind of leads me into talking about that nervous system dysregulation piece. So how critical is it to be implementing, are we implementing like more, like with the program, are we implementing more like addressing the nervous system, like the vagal toning piece? And then we're kind of working into more like practices that are helping to retrain the limbic system. Like, what's kind of the order of operations here?
The order of operations is awareness first, which is awareness of your ongoing stress response, how you're responding to your lab tests, how you're responding to your protocols, even how you respond to having to take your protocol in the morning or whatever. The way that you are interacting with your life needs to be addressed first. And you need to recognize, am I approaching this through a lens of, I'm being chased by a tiger while I'm doing my morning routine, my enema, my food thing, whatever? Or am I like taking a breath? I'm doing things to care for myself. I might have these diagnoses, but what I need to do is really shift into a state of safety. That awareness piece is the beginning, the science behind what's happening on a root level, so that you can start to reorient how you're approaching the entire picture. So, like, gosh, I am maxing myself out with a 6 hour self care routine because I'm trying to do everything under the sun to heal myself, which is actually stressing me out because I can't even show up for my kids. I can't do any errands. That is not a productive routine. It's not productive. You've got to find a way to make your lifestyle, including your healing lifestyle, have more flow and ease and allowance. And then, yes, from there, we'll move into some vagal toning, some really basic micro breaks, micro nervous system resets, and then we grow from there.
Okay. Is there a certain amount of time that per day that someone may need to work up to in terms of doing the vagal toning, in terms of doing some of these more in-depth exercises, to kind of continuously like retrain the body into saying that, hey, we are safe, everything's okay?
So this is a really good question. It has a lot of nuance to it because the truth is, the way that I learned to live my life was that my life was a nervous system regulation routine, meaning how I talked, how I would take a breath after talking a lot, how I would orient to my space. Um, the kind of thoughts that I would be thinking that I recognize, oh, these are not helpful. I'm going to interrupt them and just be present with the underlying emotion. The way I talked about my diagnosis. So you see, this is a whole way of being. Now, that being said, people need to learn the skills, the tools, and I recommend you start at least a few minutes a day, maybe up to an hour a day of learning the tools and starting to teach your brain how to think differently. But eventually, it's a way of being.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. So, in terms of those individuals that may be very sensitive, they're really dealing with like a hypervigilant immune system response, histamine levels, mast cell activation syndrome. You had talked about for those people that might feel like doing some of the vagal toning exercises may feel a little bit, it might be a little bit too much. So is that so is that awareness piece kind of like typically what you see is that first step to being like the very gentle introduction into starting to relax the nervous system? Because that to me seems like that is more gentle than starting to try to implement some vagal toning exercises.
Well, let's talk about why the vagal toning exercises are too much. The exercises themselves aren't too much. It's the way the body interprets being safe. These exercises are inducing safety, but the irony is the psyche doesn't think it's safe to feel safe. The psyche think it's better to be vigilant and in protection. So with these people, they need to like have a deep talk with themselves. It's safe to feel safe, and that safety is going to feel vulnerable. And I learned to go into protection a long time ago, especially with like mast cell and all that stuff. But you're going to have a truth talk with yourself. Like, sweetheart, I know I learned that my safety is through vigilance and hyper awareness, but that's actually harming me now. And I need to start allowing myself to learn how to trust little things. I'm trusting this chair is holding me. I'm going to practice feeling safe being supported by this chair, something very benign, but it's still training the system that it's safe to feel safe. When they get that switch in their psyche that they're willing to be vulnerable, they're willing to practice trust, the vagal toning will be more accepted by the body.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, that's so interesting. And the way you phrase that is the irony is that the body feels almost unsafe when you're trying to feel safe, when you're trying to implement some of these
100%.
exercises.
Yeah.
Wow. That is fascinating.
Yeah. It's actually a huge thing that people do not say. Like, I often say the phrase, it's safe to feel safe, even though it feels vulnerable. It's safe to learn how to trust. It's safe to learn how to trust this sip of water. It's nourishing me. You start with very simple things. It's safe to have this conversation with you. This person is a safe person. You have to look for it and reorient the psyche out of extreme protection. Yeah.
Yeah, this is going to be such a powerful conversation for so many people because throughout the amount of clients that I've worked with hundreds of clients at this point dealing with hypervigilant mast cell reactions and responses. And it always, to me, comes back to addressing that autonomic nervous system, having people go through the program, having them do some form of support that allows them to feel safe again, because oftentimes, you know, people are reacting to drinking water. They are reacting to different things in their environment, very simple things, and it becomes very scary, and then their body does feel very unsafe. So this is a very powerful conversation, and I'm so happy that you have created this beautiful program and that it's helping so many people, because this is so important to being able to just integrate into the practice of many practitioners for their clients or patients to be able to get them better faster, because that's the goal, is how can we get the body to feel safe? So, yeah.
You know, when I was sick or when I was starting to heal, I was like, gosh, if one of my doctors would have said, you know what, Kathleen, this nervous system piece is really important. I wish I would have been told that like 10 years prior, because I never focused on it. Nobody told me that I didn't know how to feel safe. They only told me about my lab tests and all the things that were wrong.
Right.
They weren't saying there's this internal rerouting that you're going to have to go through. And this is what it looks like. And this is how you do that. And so, yeah, it's my mission to make sure every practitioner is understanding how to implement this in their protocols, because it's just foundational.
It's very foundational. Well, thank you so much for this incredible information. And I'd love to just leave it to you if you have any final words for the audience, as well as where people can find you, where they can look into Primal Trust, things like that.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to say I wrote a book that's free, and maybe you can put it in your show notes. It's called How
Okay.
Healing Happens,
I will
and it's
put that.
beautiful. It's 130 pages about, and it's got lots of diagrams and science behind what we teach and actual practical examples. And it's like a free mini Primal Trust program. And I
Great.
made this so that it's just very approachable to be able to get into this work without any, financial investment. It really will be helpful for anybody listening. So that
Amazing.
is also on my website, which is primaltrust.org. And this is under the free resources section. And in fact, I have lots of free resources like Lyme
Yeah.
resources and brain retraining, etc. So there's a lot that you can get started on for free. And if it really resonates, we have an amazing membership. It's $96 a month. It includes everything. We have live daily classes, like literally we meet live almost every day on Zoom if you want. We have recorded classes, and we just walk you step by step of how do I do this? What is that journey like? And so I really wanted to create the robust support system that I so wish I would have had when I was sick. And I'm there teaching classes. I have mentors teaching classes, and it's all part of it. So you can get your questions answered. But it starts with just learning, like I said, this awareness piece, like what's going on from a nervous system level, and how can I begin to reorient? And I just want to say, like, I've worked with people who've been sick for 20, 30, 40 years, and they still can heal.
Yeah.
When this master switch of it is safe to be me, it is
Mhm.
safe to trust the world is basically good. Not everybody's perfect, and you can still have
Yeah.
your boundaries. It's safe to trust that my body has a wisdom. The safety switch is a master switch. And when that switch gets flipped, anything can happen. And I've seen it again and again and again. So,
That was beautifully said. The safety switch is a master switch. That's amazing. And also to hear the daily Zoom calls, I think that's so key in helping a lot of people because the journey can feel very lonely. So to be a part of something big and that other people are going through this transformational support as well sounds very impactful. So thank you for sharing all of that and sharing all of your wisdom today. It was so great chatting with you, Dr. Kat. And thank you for being a guest.
oh, thank you for having me.